Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar in collaboration with the United States Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration. Today's webinar will focus on the newly launched Market Diversification Tool for International Education, designed to help you and your colleagues explore new markets for international student recruitment. At this point, I'll hand it over to our special guest speakers. We have Morgan Barr. We also have Natalie Judy and Claire Otting from the International Trade Administration. Thank you so much, and let's get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Antoine, for the introduction. I will go ahead and talk about the Department of Commerce and a little bit about how we work with international recruitment and study consortia initiatives. Bear me one moment while I go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So as Antoine mentioned, my name is Natalie Judy. I'm an international trade specialist with the U.S. Commercial Service under the International Trade Administration with the Department of Commerce. I am based in San Antonio, Texas, and I do work with the study consortias both in Texas and in Southwest Texas in our region. So the U.S. Department of Commerce is the export arm for the U.S. government. It was founded in 1980. It is part of the International Trade Administration, which works to improve global business environments and help U.S. organizations compete at home and abroad. ITA is organized into three distinct but complementary units: global markets, which is where we cover the education team, industry and analysis, which is where a lot of our data come from, and enforcement and compliance, which provides advocacy information. So the U.S. Commercial Service is the trade and investment promotion arm of the U.S. Department of Commerce in ITA. So a little bit about what we do. With education institutions, as most of you all know, whenever we get an international student that comes to the United States, it counts as an export because we are exporting education and knowledge and training to the rest of the world. So some of the service that we provide educational service export counseling. We provide counseling to help recruiters and also counselors develop effective market entry strategies into different markets. We inform them about regulations in foreign markets. We inform them about U.S. export controls, compliance options. We provide a lot of market intelligence, which we're going to learn a lot about as we go through the Market Diversification Tool. We provide business matchmaking, so we connect you with pre-screened partners, promote your programs and services to prospective partners in education institutions worldwide. We meet with international industry and government decision makers. And last but not least, we do provide commercial diplomacy. So we help address any trade barriers so that you can successfully enter and perform in international markets. So we are recognized worldwide. We have over 80 offices. We have over 80 offices in 80 countries where we can provide on-the-ground knowledge and connections. If we do not have an office in the country, most likely we work with the State Department. They have economic officers and different industry officers that we connect with, so that way we can serve our clients here. We are results-driven. We have experts in various industries that provide counseling and to help you succeed in the global market. So I'm very happy to be here and share with you. Our team is going to be sharing with you how to use and leverage the Market Diversification Tool, so that way you can increase your international recruitment goals. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Morgan, which is going to introduce the Market Diversification Tool. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm just gonna, oops, I need you to stop sharing so I can share.
Yes, I'll go ahead and do that. Oop. Are you able to share?
No, you're still sharing. When I shared earlier, I could not find the button to stop sharing.
That's what I'm looking for.
Usually
Do
it's
you
at the
guys
top
know where
of
it's
the-
at? Hold on, let me see. Do you guys know where the button is to stop sharing?
Or if
One second.
Antoine has like control over the whole thing, maybe he can.
Give us 1 second.
Usually it's like right at the top of the shared screen and it's in the way all the time. Like it's constantly showing up. There we go. Okay, great. Let's see. Excellent. Okay, and Claire, you can take it away.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Morgan. Thanks, Natalie, for the introduction. Today, we'll be presenting the Market Diversification Tool for International Education. This is a tool that Morgan and I, among others, on a team of economists in the International Trade Administration, specifically in the Industry and Analysis Unit, is a tool that we developed. We do a lot of cross-sectoral data analysis, and do a lot of analysis involving large data sets and like transforming and combining that data into information that's actually accessible for our clients. And those efforts have gone into the Market Diversification Tool for International Education, which is a data-driven and interactive dashboard that's designed to help education services exporters identify and explore potential new markets. So we hope it'll be helpful for you and just another tool in your toolkit when you're making these sorts of plans for how to recruit international students. Next, please. So today we'll give some background on the tool and I'll introduce the different sources that are used in it. Then I'll hand it over to Morgan to do a live demo, which will discuss both how to navigate the tool and also going through an example use case. And then towards the end, we'll go over some additional resources that we have on the website. And we'll be happy to answer any of the questions that you have at the end. By way of background, back in 2018, we released the Market Diversification Tool for goods. So it's a tool that uses an exporter's current export patterns to then make recommendations on additional markets to consider exporting to. And since then, we've often been asked for a similar tool, but for services exporters. So that's what we're doing with the Market Diversification Tool for services. And again, bringing together these diverse data sets that are usually made for purposes other than market research and selection. But we curate that data to make it more meaningful to our intended users and present it in various ways that are more useful for answering often the very specific questions that service providers have when it comes to identifying and also comparing potential markets. So we let the user look at the data from a bunch of different perspectives. You can look at the big markets, but also at smaller markets that are growing in different ways. Or maybe you want to zoom in on a specific region. The goal here overall is to help you narrow your focus to a subset of markets and then also direct you to other resources we have that might be able to help. Education services are exported in a few different ways. So your education may export education services by providing classes online to students in other countries. That's an export. By sending educators to teach students abroad, or by having international students come study at your institution in the United States. If you open a campus, branch, or have some other commercial presence in another country, that technically doesn't count as an export, but the tool can still be a little bit useful for exploring new markets in those situations. The tool brings together 6 different data sets that each add some unique context. The first data set shows the value of education exports by country. We also have data on the policies and regulations that can affect services trade in a market, data on the number of international students who are studying here in the US, data on student entries to the US broken down by visa type, also data on the flows of tertiary students around the world. And lastly, there's some demographic and income data. The first data set that I mentioned is US export data. This comes from the BEA, or the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and specifically within their International Trade and Investment Statistics section. Data for international education from the BEA is broken down into 2 different categories. The first, which is the bulk of US exports, is this personal travel services, education-related services, that bucket underneath personal travel services. This covers expenditures by foreign students who come to the US to study. It includes stuff like tuition and living expenses and transportation within the US, both for the student and any dependents or others who travel with them. The second category falls under the broad other personal, cultural, and recreational services bucket. And this is the value of any structured learning services that are performed across borders. So things like correspondence courses and online education. It also includes instruction that's provided by US residents who travel to another country in order to teach. Next, we have data on different countries' policies and regulations that affect service suppliers operating in different markets. This data comes from the Services Trade Policy Database, which is a joint project of the World Trade Organization and the World Bank. This is data on policies that affect all service sectors, so not just the education industry, but all of the policies in here will apply to the education industry. You can view this information by the method by which the service is supplied, which is called modes, so mode of supply, and also by different categories like conditions on operations or administrative procedures. This data is really most useful for organizations who are operating in other markets, whether that's by providing services online or sending teachers abroad or by opening a location overseas. Because these are policies and regulations that apply in another country. If a student's coming here to study, US policy and regulations apply. Next is data on the number of international students, which comes from the Department of Homeland Security's Student Exchange Visitor Information System, or SEVIS. Whereas the BEA data on US exports is a value number, it has a dollar sign associated with it. This data is on the number of students in the US. You can look at international students broken down by their country of origin, the state where they're studying, gender and education level. And it also contains data that's specific to international STEM students. We also have international student entries to the United States by visa type and country. And this is also reported by the Department of Homeland Security in their Yearbook of Immigration Statistics. This shows the number of students who entered the United States. So it's like how many students arrived and on which visas, not the number of students in the US. So it's counting the act of crossing the border, of entering the US on a certain type of visa. Notably also, the data is by fiscal year. So, it runs from October to the following September. So it's a little bit different than the other annual data in the tool. But with this information, you can see how many students are coming in on F1 visas versus J1 visas. So whether they're an academic degree seeker or just an exchange student, you can compare that for a given country. You can look at that and also compare across countries to see that breakdown. We also have information on the number of international students globally and their movements using the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, data on international student mobility. This measures the number of individuals who cross international borders for college level and above education. And this is a special data set because unlike a lot of the other ones in the tool, this allows you to look at who the US is competing with for students. So you can look at things from a destination perspective. So what countries are attracting the most students and from where? Or you can look at the same data set from an origin perspective. So what countries are sending the most students abroad? Lastly, we have demographic data, which comes from the World Bank's World Development Indicators database. It helps provide context to some of the data that's found elsewhere in the tool to help users determine the number of potential students in each market. So it has data on a market's population and the number of people in key age groups that are more likely to be students. And then it also has data that's specific to sort of the education of the market's population. So we'll say the percentage of their population that has advanced degree, for example. And then there's also the income and income inequality statistics, which may be able to help you determine how many students in this market might be able to afford to come to the US. And with that, I'll turn it over to Morgan to actually demo the tool.
Great, thanks so much, Claire. Claire, could you please put a link to the tool in the chat? And then I will switch over to the website and we can talk about
I believe
that.
it's already in the chat.
Oh,
Wonderful. Thank
excellent.
you.
Sorry, I can't see the chat. Great, fantastic. Excellent. Okay, so now we'll turn to demoing the actual tool. I'm going to go through how to navigate the tool and then walk through an example use case. So when you first get to the web page, you just scroll down a little bit and you'll see the tool here. I'm just going to make it bigger so it you can see it more easily. The first thing you'll see is a disclaimer. You can just close that. And you can navigate around the tool using all of these buttons in the dashboard. So links to the different pages in the tool and topics are over here on the left. If you hover over them, it's going to tell you what topic is covered on each page. And then the dark blue background indicates that it's the current page. So we're on the home because it's the little house. So here on the homepage, we have background on the different data sets along with definitions for the modes of supply, which is just a fancy term for the different ways that services can be supplied internationally that factors into some of the regulatory and other data that's in the tool. There's also guidance on citing the data in the tool. If you click on any of these boxes, it's going to open a pop-up with additional information on the data set or whatever topic is covered, and then you just click the X to close it. So I'm going to go to one of the data pages and we'll talk about navigating within the data sets. So every page also has a pop-up guide up here in the top right to help you navigate. If you're ever lost, you just click this button and it will open up this page overlay that's like, here's where everything is on the page and how to do everything here. And then you just click the X to close it. One thing to note is the titles at the top of the page are going to tell you what the topic is. So here we are in the BEA services export data section. We're on the compare trade data for multiple countries page. And we're looking at US exports of personal travel services, education related services, which is just the default. Like Claire said, that's the bulk of US exports. And this is going to be the value of exports from students coming to the US to study. On any page, you can tailor results by choosing what data is included. So to do this, you're going to open the selections pane. It's this blue arrow on the right. And it's going to open up a selections pane that'll look different on each page because there's different choices. And then you can make any selections that you want here, and then the data will update and you can just close the selections pane. If the page only allows you to select one factor, which is usually like a single country, then the box to make that selection will just be right on the page instead of a whole separate page that pops out. You can see different presentations of the data by clicking on these buttons with icons. So right now we have summary statistics. This is like just total US exports. This is the percent change year to year in US exports. Again, if you hover over them, it'll tell you what's covered. I'm going to go to a different page. So here, some data sets are going to have more navigation within them. So we're here looking at the CVIS data, which is data on students studying in the United States. And this is a very broad data set that covers a lot of topics. So it covers total students in the US. We have students by education level, by state, by genders, special data on STEM students. So if you see buttons up here on the right, those are going to be navigating within a topic. So here we're navigating within that CVIS data. And so here I've selected students by education level. I can navigate further using these buttons on the top left. So we can see this data by data for a single country. So here we're looking at students from China studying across all different education levels, but we could also see data for a single education level and look across all countries. So you can sort of view the data from different perspectives. Okay, so we go here. So for some visuals and topics, you're going to see these little question marks floating around. If you hover over them, it's going to give you additional information on that visual. Sometimes it's how was this value calculated? What does this include? What do we mean? Here it's explaining what null or blank values mean in this data set. You can also interact with the visuals themselves, like using one visual to filter another. So here, if I click on India over here in the table, it's going to highlight India in the chart. And then you just click on India again, and it deselects it. So when we were first working with this software, I would click on things and then I was like, why is it stuck on focusing on just one country? It's because I clicked on it. You just click on it again, it will deselect it. You can download the data from individual visuals. You can also download a summary report of the dashboard. That feature is having issues right now. We are trying to fix, but to download data for an individual visual, you're going to click on the visual and you'll see up in the top right corner, I'm sorry, it's probably very small on your screens. You're going to see a little ellipses button, which is 3 dots. This says more options. If you click that, it's going to say export data. And then you can export as an Excel file. You can click the summarized data and export as a CSV, but nothing's huge. So any one of these visuals, you can export the data right to a spreadsheet. To export the summary file, you would click this button above the dashboard where it says export report and choose how you want to export it. Right now that is not working. I'm hoping to get it working soon. There's just an issue where it's not keeping your selections when it exports. So I'm not going to focus too much on that. Also, it's a very long report that's like 50 pages. Let me go back here. Another thing you can do is if you're like, oh, everything's really small, you can, in any visual, there's a little thing that's like expand, and that goes to focus mode. You can open up the visual and see it bigger, and then just click back to report to go back to the normal view. So I'm going to walk through an example of how you might use the tool. Obviously, this is going to depend on your unique situation, what you're trying to do, what your previous experience is. Like, this is just just an example. So I'm going to imagine I'm a college in Texas. Funny that. Recruiting students to study in the US for our bachelor's program. And we know what the big markets are, but maybe we want to see what trends there are in students coming to the US or coming to Texas, and maybe identify some new markets that we may want to target for recruitment. So I'm going to start by looking at the big picture, which is going to be trade by region, this first button on the top right. And over here, I'm going to notice that in the top right corner here, we've got a chart with like values for by region, and everything's dominated by Asia Pacific, right? So here we're talking about US exports of travel services, so that's students coming to the US, that's what we want. So if I want to dig into it, I can look at just Asia. I can click on this selections pane and then just pick Asia and Pacific. And when I close that, now we can see just data for countries in the Asia Pacific region. Obviously, China and India are the big markets. That's not a surprise. But there are other countries here with a lot of trade that we may not have considered. And you'll notice that they don't have every country in Asia listed. There's not very many countries listed here. Smaller markets are going to be grouped into these other Asia and Pacific categories. The Bureau of Economic Analysis, who produces this data, currently reports services data for about 72 individual countries. It's getting better all the time. Hopefully that will continue expanding. The smaller markets get grouped into these other categories. So it'll say other Europe, other South and Central America. So it's not going to have like individual country detail for every market. Down here, we can look at top markets by total exports over the period or by growth. So we can like look at the fast growing markets. But maybe I'm really interested in this other category. I want to look at some of the markets here that aren't showing up in the data. I can look at specifically the number of students who are coming to the US. So I'm going to click on this icon over here that looks like a flag because this is the CVIS data, and that's flows of students specifically coming to the US. And this is going to take me to the main CVIS page. And you're probably already familiar with the CVIS by the numbers report or the data mapping tool. The mapping tool that's on the DH website is going to show you a snapshot from a given month. Here we've taken all of that monthly data that they publish every month. We've turned it into a time series, so you can see it over time. And this data, like Claire said, tracks the number of international students in the US at any given month of time. One thing to note with this data is that it is reported as a monthly snapshot, but it historically has not been reported every month. So you'll see farther back, there's a lot of space between these dots. And then more recently, they're very close together, except for this little space here. So if there's a line graph in the tool, that's going to show you the individual monthly data for the last 5 years. But if there's a table like over here, it's averaging that monthly data for the year rather than adding it up. So if there's 3 months of data in 1 year and 1 month in another year, it doesn't just add them all up. It would make the year with 3 months look huge. It averages them for the number of months that are available for the year. So this really helps keep it consistent and comparable across time. Another thing to note is that anywhere in the tool, if in the selections pane, you have selected nothing, no countries are selected, that is the equivalent to having everything selected. It's going to show you data for everything. So here, nothing is selected. Here, this chart with the line chart is the top 10 selected countries of origin. So it's the top 10 in the whole world because we've selected no markets. If I just select one market, here, I'll pick Argentina because I was an exchange student in Argentina. It's only going to show you that one market. You can pick up to 10. It will show you exactly what you've selected. We limit it to the top 10 because if you can't you 100 and some lines on a chart, it literally will not render them. And so this helps make it like understandable, but still able to explore different things. So using the CVIS data, I can look at things based on the education level of student. First, I want to note one of the interesting things that happened recently is that the number of students from India has, since last year, surpassed the number of students from China for the first time. So that's a really interesting trend in the data. But now I'm going to go look at data by education level. So up here in the top right, I'm going to click on students by education level. And I'm going to click on single education level because I'm interested in bachelor's level students. Bachelor's is the default setting in here. If I wanted to change it, I can open the selections pane on the left and change which education level I'm talking about. And here we can see, of course, China and India are the big gorillas in the room, the largest number of students. And if I look at the shares for the most recent month, which is this donut chart here, like 23% is coming from China, and then another 10% is coming from India. And if I go to the line chart, obviously, like it looks like here's China for bachelor students. Everybody else is kind of smushed here at the bottom. So here if we look at like the total numbers over here, like South Korea is kind of going up a little bit, Canada's going up a little bit, Vietnam's a little bit, Saudi Arabia has gone down dramatically, so you can see some trends. I can also look at international students in Texas specifically. I'm going to go to students by state. And I'm going to click on see data for a single state. The default here is Alabama because they come first in the alphabet. And then I'm going to open the selections pane and change that to Texas. Okay. And then I'm going to close that. Okay, so now we can see what the top countries are for students coming to Texas. Again, we're seeing India and China at the top of the results, but I can filter this, it's getting everybody smushed down here at the bottom. It's kind of hard to tell who's what. So one thing you can do is filter out like the big, huge markets that are sort of distorting things. I can go to the selections pane, I can click select all, and then just deselect China and India. And then close this again. And maybe I just want to like focus in on Asia here. Deselected. So now we're looking at top 10 countries in Asia for students coming from Texas, other than China and India. So you can see a lot more trends here. So what we can see, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so this top yellow line here, this is students coming from Nepal, which is kind of surprising, interesting, and we can see that those numbers have been trending up. Students from Vietnam, which I think is the second one here. If you're never sure, you can just click on the country over here, and then it'll be, yes, so that was Vietnam. Because sometimes they'll run off the page, or the colors might be kind of close together because it's trying to generate 200 colors from the 10 colors that we gave it. Oops. So we can see some of the top markets here and the trends here. Again, this is data on all students coming to Texas, so it's not broken down by education level. The breakdown of state by education level by country is not published publicly by DHS because it would just be massive tables that they can't fit on their website. But you can get some additional detail if you go to the CVIS mapping tool. So if you wanted to see bachelor students from in Texas for a given month, you can see it, but you have to look at it 1 month at a time. So I am kind of intrigued about Nepal here. So let's look at some more data for that. I'm going to look at how they're entering the US, like what visas their Nepalese students are coming in on. So I'm going to the visa data is this one that looks like a passport with a plane ticket. I'm going to click on single country here and select. Okay, So here we can see the breakdown of what visas the students from Nepal are entering the US on. The vast majority of students are coming in on academic visas versus exchange visas. And we can see how the number of F1 visas has dramatically rebounded since the pandemic and is now above pre-pandemic levels. So that's interesting to know. Maybe I want to know where else in the world students from Nepal are studying. I can look at the UNESCO data, which is going to be this one that looks like an airplane and a globe. And here I really care about Nepal as an origin. So I'm going to go to single origin. And here I'm going to pick country of origin is, I should have just typed it in. I scrolled past it. No. And here, so here you can see you can pick destination country. So if you just wanted to see like US, UK, Australia, Canada, or whatever, you can focus in on just those markets. But here I want to see where they're studying in the whole world. So I'm not going to pick any destination countries. So this table is going to show you top destinations for Nepalese students in 2021. This is tertiary students, so that's ISCED levels 5 through 8. So it's not going to include anybody like high school level or below. Because this data, so how to explain? So the data is reported by the destination country. Not all the countries report data. So for example, China doesn't report any data. So we don't have any visibility into students who are studying in China. And that data would not be included in the global totals for the countries of origin here. Also, not all countries report every year. So the US did not report data for 2019. Not all countries are up to date on their reporting. There's a very kind of long lag in this tool. The data is pretty good for 2021. There's not complete data for 2022 yet. The next time it'll be updated is in October, and then hopefully we have a lot more data in here, but there is kind of a long lag here. And unfortunately, the data is kind of height of the pandemic in 2021 at this point. So it can provide some context, but it's not as up to date, certainly, as the CVIS data, which we have for April in the tool. And we'll be updating for May probably this week. So we see here that for Nepal, the top destinations are Australia, Japan, India, and the United States. The United States ranks 4th for Nepalese students, and that's going to be the rank as destination here. And about 12% of Nepalese students that we know have studied abroad, are studying in the United States in 2021. That's this share of origin value here. So all in all, this data from UNESCO allows you to look at student movement trends outside of the United States, see who we're competing with for students, and what the latest trends are there, but with like a lag. But it's the only data that's like outside of the US. So then maybe I want to get an idea of how many potential students are in Nepal. If I click the data, the button that looks like a group of people waiting for an elevator, that's going to go to the demographic and income data, and then I can pick Nepal from here. And it's going to give me some data on the population in different key age groups that are more likely to be students. So here we have 10 to 29. For most countries, there's going to be educational data, like Claire was mentioning, the share of the population with different levels of education. This isn't available for Nepal. The availability is going to vary from country to country. And there is per capita GDP, but there's no income distribution data available for Nepal. It is available for other countries. So you're going to see some inconsistency in what data is available by country from this. But this is just data to provide additional context to the other data that's in the tool. So the last data set I want to talk about that I haven't talked about in this example is the policy data. You get to it by clicking the button that looks like a little certificate here. This data is from the World Bank and the WTO. Again, like Claire said, these regulations aren't specific to education. They apply to all service suppliers. So this is not going to be really relevant if you're just recruiting students to come to the US, because the other countries' regulations don't apply to you. But it can be helpful if you're operating in the other market by providing online services, if you're sending teachers abroad, or if you have a campus there. So like if you're providing remote learning opportunities to students abroad, that's considered like mode 1 cross-border trade, which is one of the selections you can make in here. So the data is visible by this page is compared to more than one countries, and then there's more detail on the policies in the single country. So here I'm just gonna click some countries here. You can pick up to 5, I think is the limit. And then you can choose what is the mode that you're providing the service. If you hover over this question mark, it'll tell you the different mode definitions. Oops, I need to resize this tooltip. And there's also more information on the modes of supply on the homepage. And then there's different categories and subcategories of policies. I have to resize this one too, sorry about that. And the definitions for the different categories will be here. But again, this is really only relevant if you are like operating in that other market. And so you'll see for this category of policies, which is conditions on operations, conditions on the service supplier, the different countries have been asked, do they have policies in this section? And they answer yes or no. There's some blanks because not all the countries were asked the same year. So the list of questions has expanded over time. And then if I want more detail on the specific policies in a country, I'll go to the single country page and I will pick, where is Algeria? I think it's the same categories. Okay, so now here we're, instead of just yes or no questions, it's giving me specific details on the actual policies. It's giving me links to laws and things like that. So you can get lots more detail, and then you can download all of the data for a country. If you go to this page, it'll take you to a page where all of the data is in this one table, and you can just export it again by clicking more options and export data. So that's it for the demo. And then I just want to point out that below the tool itself, there's a couple of videos. One is on exploring the data sets. One is on navigating the tool, which are a good reference for later. Our email address is here. Our frequently asked questions page is noted there. And then there's some additional information on the data, as well as some other links that are helpful to you. So there's a link to our training education team home, our market intelligence for the education industry, the professional business services team, the country commercial guides, all useful resources that, like, once you've gotten an idea of some different countries, they can maybe provide some information on specific opportunities in those markets. So I hope you will find the tool useful, and then of course, please contact us if you have any questions about anything, but we are happy to answer questions for the rest of the time here too. I don't know if any have come in.
There was one question that came in chat that is also just a very common question, so I'd be happy to verbally answer it as well. The question was about if the tool has any data on visa denials. This is a common request from our audiences. Unfortunately, there just isn't any published, released data on visa refusals or the rates of visa refusals, except for the B visa category. That's just all tourist visas. We don't have a breakdown for any of the student visa categories that we focus on here.
Okay, so there's a question here about, does the tool have data on short or long-term study abroad, or only full degree. So Claire, maybe you can talk about the CVIS data categories. That's probably what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so the CVIS data would have both, because it includes F, M, and J visas. So that's all three categories, either, just short-term study abroad, academic degree seeking, or vocational school. So the US data would include both the study abroad and also full degree seeking students.
But it would be categorized by the type of, like, the level of education the person is, and that's just the way the CVIS system collects the data. Okay, so there's a question about when the data will be updated for next year. So the different data sets in the tool are updated at different times of the year. So we anticipate, I'm thinking the BEA data is going to be released early next month. So that'll be the services data that's in the first 3 sections of the tool. So these first 3 pages, that is scheduled to be released in July. The CVIS data, Claire does a great job of updating that monthly as soon as DHS updates it. And then I think the visa type data is October. Is that when the report comes out? So that would be reported in October for last fiscal year, for fiscal year 2023. And as I mentioned, the global flows of student data is updated in October and March. And then the demographic data is updated throughout the year. So we sort of have a schedule of like when to go look for new data. Any other questions? It's a lot to throw at you. But we're always here. Feel free to email us or contact us if you have any questions about anything in the tool, or you want to know how to get at a certain answer to a question. We tried to make it flexible, but that made it like very, very big with lots of different options and things, buttons to click on and sections to look at. So if you need any help navigating later on, let us know.